Thank you very much. Just to remind delegates that the rules and processes apply. So before we proceed, please be reminded that rules and processes apply, and also be reminded of the following: that the virtual sitting constitutes a sitting of the National Council of Provinces, that the place of the sitting is deemed to be Cape Town, where the seat of the National Council of Provinces is, that delegates in the virtual sitting enjoy the same powers and privileges that apply in a sitting of the National Council of Provinces, that for the purpose of the quorum, all delegates who are logged on to the virtual platform shall be considered present, and that delegates must always switch on their videos. That delegates should ensure that the microphones on their gadgets are muted and must always remain muted. That all delegates should note that the interpretation facility is active, and that any delegate who wishes to speak must use the raise your hand function or icon. I will then proceed and indicate that I have been informed that there will be no notices of motion or motions without notice, except the motion on the order paper in the name of the Chief Whip. I now call on the Honorable Chief Whip to table the motion.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I move that the motion on the order paper be accepted by the House. Thank you, Chair.
We'll now proceed to voting on the motion. I shall put the question, and the question is that the motion be agreed to. Before we proceed to voting, I shall allow provinces the opportunity to make their declarations of vote in terms of Rule 71, if they so wish. And the maximum time allowed for making the declaration is 3 minutes per declaration. Any declaration from provinces?
No.
None. I will now call upon the provinces to cast their votes, and when called upon, the heads of delegations must indicate whether they vote in favor, against, or abstain. So we'll do it alphabetically, starting with the Eastern Cape.
Eastern Cape agreed.
Eastern Cape agrees. Free State?
Honorable Chair, I have not a mandate to cast a vote as we have not tabled this at the Free State legislature. So, thank you.
Okay. Gauteng?
Gauteng agrees.
Gauteng agrees. KwaZulu-Natal?
KwaZulu-Natal iyayeseka sihlala motion.
Thank you very much. Limpopo, American and the team.
Limpopo support.
Limpopo supports. Mpumalanga.
Mpumalanga support.
Mpumalanga supports. Northern Cape.
Northern Cape supports, Chair.
Northern Cape support.
Northern Cape
Thank you
support.
very much. Northwest, sorry. What would you read?
Honorable Chair, Northwest supports.
Northwest support. Western Cape.
Honorable Chair, I couldn't hear that clearly. On what are we voting now?
We're
Before I
voting
cast
on
my-
the motion by the chief whip that they should be.
the 3-day rule motion.
Yes.
Yes, it's a 3-day rule.
I abstain.
Western Cape abstains. Thank you very much. Voting is now closed. And in total, 7 provinces have voted in favor and one abstention. I therefore declare the motion agreed to in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. Thank you very much. We will then proceed.
Honorable Chair.
Honorable members,
Honorable Chair.
through the order paper.
Honorable Chair.
Yes, yes.
Honorable Chair.
Yes, Honorable Smith.
I apologize, sir. I took the wrong document. We support the paper, sir.
No, we've done with
Sorry, sir. Thank you.
We've done with the matter, so we can't go.
The provincial.
Thank you very much. We'll now proceed to the order on the order paper. Division of Revenue Second Amendment Bill, B24-2020, National Assembly, Section 76, and report of Select Committee on appropriation thereon. I call on Honorable Mahlangu, Chairperson of the Select Committee on Appropriation, to open the debate.
Albongwe.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Deputy Chairperson, Honorable Minister Atemboni, permanent and special delegates present in this August House, fellow South Africans, Lochan. I am honored, Chairperson, to table before this August House a report on the Division of Revenue Second Amendment Bill 2020 on behalf of the Select Committee on Appropriations. The committee anonymously adopted the report while the DA, the Freedom Front Plus, and the EFF reserved their rights. The Minister of Finance tabled the Division of Revenue Second Amendment Bill in Parliament on the 28th October 2020 during the presentation of the 2020 MTBPS. The bill was tabled in terms of Section 12, subsection 4 of the Money Bills and Related Act number 9 of 2009. The Act requires the Minister of Finance to table a Division of Revenue Amendment Bill with a revised fiscal framework if the budget adjustments effect changes to the Division of Revenue Act for the relevant year. Subsequently, the bill was referred to the National Council of Provinces and to the committee on the 20th of November 2020. Prior to that, Honorable Chairperson, the committee undertook a joint hearing process with the Standing Committee on Appropriations. The committee received a briefing from National Treasury on the bill on the 12th of November 2020. Provinces were invited in these meetings, in all our meetings, and were also briefed individually by permanent delegates on the 23rd of November 2020, except for the issue of Northern Cape, which has been given. The negotiation mandates were submitted and considered on 24th November, and final mandates on the 25th November 2020. In order to facilitate effective public participation in line with Section 72 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa, the committee published an advert on the 11 official languages, and written submissions were received from COSATU, the Pay Grants Campaign, and Equal Education. with an equal education, Honorable Chairperson. In accordance with Section 214, subsection 2 of the Constitution and Section 10, subsection 4 of the Intergovernmental Fiscal Relations Act number 97 of 1997, the committee consulted with the FFC, SALGA, and PBO. While the processing of the bill, the committee observed the following issues and made recommendations. The Minister of Finance should ensure that the National Treasury gazettes the corrections to the conditional grants framework as set out in the bill, in accordance with Section 16, subsection 4 of the Division of Revenue Act 2020, as soon as possible. The National Treasury, together with the Department of COGTA, should conduct service delivery impact assessment emanating from the proposed budget cuts in local and provincial government to raise the 10.5 billion rands for the SAA Business Rescue Plan. This should demonstrate how these cuts will affect the implementation of the NDP and the medium-term strategic framework. Poor and vulnerable South African will definitely or might be will definitely be affected. This report, Honorable Chair, should include measures taken by it's actually including measures taken by government to mitigate the possible impact. Furthermore, the Minister of Finance with the cabinet should ensure that appropriate measures are taken to prevent the movement of funds from already distressed and dysfunctional municipalities and infrastructure programs to bail out mismanaged state-owned entities at the expense of service delivery. The movement of funds should not infringe on the constitutional rights of poor and vulnerable South Africans. Whilst the committee welcomes the additional 1.5 billion rands in response to job losses resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic, allocated as part of the stimulus package to create job opportunities through labor intensive projects, the committee is of the view that the culture of poor planning, the lack of clear reporting framework, and time-mass expenditure in such initiatives should be urgently addressed by government to avoid a repeat of the challenges reported in the Jobs Fund. The committee is of the view that lessons learned from the 9 years of implementing Jobs Fund can assist to improve the work of the Presidential Employment Initiative to achieve better results. In order to prevent wasteful and fruitless expenditure, the Minister of Finance, together with the Minister of Basic Education, provincial departments of education, and provincial treasuries should ensure that concrete steps are taken to build and demonstrate the required capacity to spend the proposed additional 7 billion rands to the PES to employ education assistants at schools and to save governing body posts, as well as the 500 million rands added for food relief in response to COVID-19. These steps should include developing a clear system to monitor and evaluate such expenditure to ensure that unnecessary problems are eliminated during food parcel distribution. Honorable Chairperson, with regards to the COVID-19 economic relief package, the committee is mindful that the provincial sphere has committed to prioritize 20 billion rands from its own PES to the COVID-19 response. However, the committee strongly recommends that all healthcare and frontline services budget should be protected, and provincial treasuries, Honorable Ngomani, should put in place clear monitoring and evaluation mechanisms for expenditure and performance to ensure that mismanagement of funds is prevented at all times. Parliament, together with provincial legislatures, should monitor progress through effective oversight and in-year monitoring. The Minister of Finance should ensure that National Treasury approves the rollovers for the provincial and local government grants contained in the bill for all projects near completion timelessly in accordance with the necessary financial management prescripts. Whilst the committee noted the proposed reduction of the 25.3 billion rands as part of the overall wage bill, reduction of 160 billion rands to ensure fiscal consolidation and economic reconstruction and recovery, the committee recommends that the issue of the public wage bill should be discussed and concluded fairly and amicably in the Public Service Coordinating Bargaining Council. And that such reduction should not affect the frontline service delivery workers. Honorable Chairperson and honorable members, while the allocation of 12 million rands reprioritized into the indirect component of the water service infrastructure grant for the implementation of various water services interventions is a step in the right direction. The committee recommends that more resources should be found for the Department of Water and Sanitation and the Department of Agriculture, Rural Development and Land Reform to address the persistent water crisis and drought affecting some provinces in order to protect food security. Honorable members, honorable chairperson, the finalization of the draft public procurement bill should be expedited to ensure that the majority of South Africans participate in the economic mainstream. The Minister of Finance, together with the Minister of Economic Development, Trade, Industry and Competition, should address the economic barriers, social inequality, and societal polarization by adopting a localized product value chain approach. The expression of this approach should also be found in the incentives framework of both provincial and local conditional grants as hard conditions to permit procurement of goods only if they are made or assembled locally within the South African borders. To stimulate the domestic economy and encourage local opportunities while taking international trade agreements into consideration. The committee appeals with National Treasury that the Department of COGTA and together with SALGA to continue to support municipalities to resolve the issue of ESCOM and water boards debt issues, and to ensure that the matter of provincial and national departments owing municipalities are also expeditiously addressed to assist municipal finances, to boost the municipal finances, instead of implementing budget cuts in local government. They should further ensure that municipalities create credible credit control measures, debt management policies, and effective revenue collection strategies. The Minister of Finance and Cabinet should take concrete steps to prevent the mismanagement of COVID-19 funds and to ensure that consequence management is enforced for corruption and malfeasance during PPE procurement. National Treasurer, together with the Department of Health, should table a detailed COVID-19 expenditure and performance report in Parliament, including how the remaining funds will be appropriated. And these affect the government at all three spheres of government. The Minister of Finance and other ministers should also ensure that National Treasury and other departments avail the necessary performance information when requested by oversight and government advisory bodies, such as the FFC, and Honorable Chairperson, the Minister of Social Development and Basic Education, together with the Minister of Finance, should ensure that proper financial management mechanisms are put in place to prevent wastage and fruitless expenditures of the funds allocated to ECDs. That amounts to 496 million rands, and school sanitation program that one amounts to 475 million rands, and further explore ways to retain the long-term unemployment grant of 350 rand for unemployment individuals between the ages of 18 and 59. This could provide a safety net for the poorest of the poor, even though it will never be enough to cater for all, considering the current economic situation across South Africa. Given the current economic situation, Honorable Chair, with declining revenue collection and the rising budget deficit, the committee recommends that government should continue to make use of all legislative measures at its disposal to fight corruption, including recovering monies which have been lost as a result of wrongdoing, whether in state capture, PPE procurement, or government officials who contravene Public Finance Management Act and supply chain management, root out corruption. Honorable Chairperson and members, whilst the committee appreciates the COVID-19 challenges led to the MTBPS being introduced in Parliament a week later, it has meant that the usual tight time frame for processing the bill was intensified this year, and the committee and the provincial legislatures would have wanted attention to the bill, Honorable Chairperson and Honorable Minister, through your chair. We urge the Minister of Finance to introduce the MTBPS timelessly in future going forward. The committee believes that the House chairpersons of both the National Assembly and the NCOP need to look into the possibilities of giving the NCOP more time and space to process the MTBPS in future. While recognizing the specific time constraints this year and
as
other...
As you conclude, Honorable Member.
As I conclude, Honorable Chairperson, that's unfortunate. I wish to thank the committee members for the dedication that they have shown, the members of the committees from portfolio committees from the provinces, the support staff, the stakeholders, the media, and the general public, which they have made it possible for us to make sure that within the given space of time, we were able to process the amended, the adjusted second amendment bill. The committee, therefore, Honorable Chairperson, recommends to the House that the bill be adopted without any amendment.
Thank you very much, Honorable ladies. Allow me to extend a word of warm welcome to the Minister of Finance, Mr. Tito Mboweni. And having done so, we'll now proceed to Honorable D.R. Ryder. Honorable Ryder.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Anyone expecting any good news in this second adjustment appropriation and the subordinate division of revenue is not living in the real world. Every South African should be aware by now that the country was already in deep trouble following 10 years of state capture. And yes, Mr. Zuma and your legal team, state capture is a real thing. The pillaging of the state by avaricious politicians and the politically connected deployed cadres has left state coffers empty. Not only were our resources stolen, but more money was borrowed so that more could be stolen. Never mind ineptitude, there was malice aforethought and criminal theft. The Zondo Commission is testimony to this. If only we could now start seeing some convictions. But now we have to pay back the money that was borrowed, and we can't even really afford the interest. And then along came COVID-19. What devastation was caused? The overkill of a lockdown has decimated our economy and placed more people out of work. We already had an unemployment rate that was out of control, and now the business-killing lockdown has put many, many more people in the unemployment queue. 11.2 million people now sit without work, and that is just the official figure. So the adjustment that we're busy contemplating now was bound to be a sobering, wretched, and miserable update. We all expected a sharp cut in budget to most departments, shifting funds from important projects to life-saving ones. That is what is needed. If only that was what we were considering today. Instead, we have a confused and confusing reallocation of funds, which seems to be trying to show that our President and Finance Minister have both misled the country. The Finance Minister was quite clear in February. He told us that there was no more money for failing state-owned enterprises. So what was the result of that statement? Well, today we're considering a 10.5 billion rand bailout for SAA. And let's not play word games, Mr. Minister. Even your caucus colleagues have stopped calling it a capital restructuring and allocation. It's a bailout. So it seems, Mr. Minister, that you've lost another fight in cabinet. First, you said you lost the fight to end the economy-killing hard lockdown, and now you've lost the fight to start our recovery. That's 2-0, Mr. Minister, and we're in injury time already. But sometimes one must accept losing a battle in pursuit of winning the war. So when things don't go the way that you expected them in a political battle, you always look at the signals that have been sent in the detail. What are the messages that are being given in those details? Well, it's terrifying to see that that's where the real confusion sets in. President Ramaphosa said that government would be driving an infrastructure-led economic recovery. This excited me because it's both my belief and experience that infrastructure capacity leads growth. Growth creates opportunity. Opportunity creates jobs. Jobs create more demand, and that puts more demand for more infrastructure capacity to be created in order to continue the cycle. So good news then? Well, not really. When one looks at the biggest losers in the second adjustment division of revenue bill, it's the infrastructure projects that suffer the most. The one cut that alarmed me personally is the more than 51% reduction in the regional bulk infrastructure grant in Mfuleni, Gauteng. This is money that's intended to improve the broken infrastructure that's causing the spillage of megaliters of sewage per day into streets, houses, and into the Vaal River system. This project could not have been delayed by the lockdown, as the entire value chain fell under the essential services category. Imagine my disappointment and anger, and that of the Gauteng Finance Committee, when Treasury told us that the money which had been originally appropriated in response to our calls for the funding has been taken away since the Department of Human Settlements, Water and Sanitation had no plan, and so supply chain processes had not even begun. This necessitated a removal of the funds to somewhere else where the money will be spent in the current financial year. There was no plan. There's no plan to protect our drinking water, to remove the health risks, and to provide the most basic of services that government is supposed to provide. With the Mfuleni municipality in tatters and the Gauteng province now administering much of their affairs, this is a failure of all three spheres of government. It's also a failure of this House, as our oversight has taken us to Mfuleni, and yet we have done nothing to assist the residents. Ironically, it's the people of the Free State who will suffer, with the sewage seeping into the rivers that ultimately provide the Free State with their drinking water. But let's focus now on the most worrying aspect of the second adjustment, the part that makes this a Hail Mary budget. Provinces have had their budget for public wages cut by 25.3 billion rand. The Treasury are gambling on a favorable court decision in the wage dispute in order to make this budget work. The cuts to provinces appear to have been done on a very simple headcount weighted basis without interrogation. There's been no assessment of efficiency rates. There's been no evaluation of frontline to administration ratios or of management to productive staff ratios. When queried on this, Treasury hid behind the following statement, and I'm quoting from their report. It would not be appropriate for government to comment on a matter that is before the courts or to negatively influence negotiations currently underway with Labour about options for a settlement, which must go to the PSCBC. Not appropriate to give the decision makers that you rely on to pass the bill the fundamental information needed to make their decisions? That's not appropriate. Treasury, your arrogance is now too much to stomach. As I said, Treasury is gambling, but they're using the money of provinces to fund their bets. That's not right. There's a helpline for that type of behavior. The problem is that this creates a contingent liability on the balance sheet of every single province. That creates complications in terms of how those balance sheets are viewed by lenders, by investors and ratings agencies. It is not right. Furthermore, when asked what would happen if the court decision was unfavorable, Treasury indicated that they would respond to that when the decision is made, effectively saying that they'll cross that bridge when we come to it. It's my experience that when a court makes a decision in a labour dispute, they demand immediate settlement, including a correction in pay, but also a payout to the back pay. Treasury's response cannot be immediate to that. A further adjustment appropriation would take weeks, if not months, to process, just like this one, even though we have rushed this process to a point where it has given insufficient time for full or adequate scrutiny. It has still taken a longer time than any court will agree to. Just to point out, in this process, Limpopo and Free State couldn't even get a quorum together to offer us their opinions on the division of revenue in time to meet the deadlines. Provincial treasuries must therefore be given some tangible written undertaking or a guarantee that an unfavorable court decision will not result in a liquidity crisis for them, and that Treasury will absorb all of the costs. The contingency reserve that was referred to in Treasury's response is insufficient to cover this and has already been committed, albeit illegally, to keep SOEs afloat. It seems, Mr. Minister, that you've run out of ideas to keep funding the crazy dreams of your cabinet colleagues, and that unless you start winning some of those battles, this country is destined for banana republic status. I said it at our large engagement. The developmental state has become a survivalist state. What we need to do now is that every single cent that government has of the people's money must be scrutinized before spending. Cut the vanity projects. Remember that local and provincial government is the coalface of service delivery. Where these spheres are functional, they must be empowered. And where they are not, government, and indeed the governing party, needs to take urgent steps to ensure effective and prudent spending of public money becomes the norm. We hear about radical economic transformation. On recent performance in local government, radical economic transformation would be to stop small groups of people from stealing the money meant to be spent on the people who need it the most. This adjustment doesn't do that. It doesn't prioritize those who are reliant on government, and it cannot therefore be supported by any member who claims to be a representative of the people. The Democratic Alliance rejects this bill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll now move on to Honorable Mbonyane from the Eastern Cape. Honorable Mbonyane. We'll move on then to the next speaker, Honorable MS Muletsane. Honorable Muletsane.
Yes, Chair. Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the EFF has consistently in the past advised those in power to review the funding model, which is highly indicative of lack of empathy for the poor and anti-poor sentiments, and evidenced by their continued bailing out of SOEs. at the expense of local government. In a country where the majority of municipalities have no meaningful and sustainable economic activity, it makes absolutely no sense that only 10% of the national revenue raised is allocated to municipalities. When communities expect and demand service delivery, that expectation and demands is directed at their local municipalities, and rightfully so. After all, it is the municipalities who are mandated with ensuring efficient service delivery of housing, electricity, water, and sanitation. To allocate a mere 85 billion to municipalities out of 1.8 trillion is to not only incapacitate the municipalities, but to spit in the faces of South Africans who desperately need and constantly protest for basic service delivery. The reduction in funding allocation for provinces and local government conditional grants will come from essential services such as healthcare grants for TB and HIV, community outreach programs, the revitalization of health facilities, and agricultural economy revitalization, all of which are vital to poor communities. Currently, the Eastern Cape is facing second phase of COVID-19 infections, and the healthcare system is buckling and in some instances has already collapsed under the pressure to provide necessary services to those who need them. This failure comes on the back of an already dysfunctional healthcare infrastructure. The schools infrastructure in rural parts of KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo, and Eastern Cape is outdated and in some cases non-existent, with many schools still using pit toilets, while schools in the suburbs are deeply engaged in technological advancement and digital learning. The province of the Northwest still faces frequent and lengthy disruptions in water and electricity supply and a collapse in vital infrastructure, while Limpopo is struggling with water shortages. In Mpumalanga, local clinics and hospitals are dilapidated. The Free State is burdened with aging water and sewage infrastructure, and the Northwest and the Northern Cape is still struggling with housing. Yet there is a reduction in funding to provinces and local government infrastructure grants, which are meant to address these needs by putting money back into infrastructure projects. As the EFF have cautioned against the use of conditional grants as provided for in the national revenue for frivolous and narrow ideological policies, when these funds could be channeled towards the revitalization of South Africa's local economy. We, as the EFF, have called on government tirelessly to amend the method in which the division of revenue is executed. We cannot support a division of revenue bill that seeks to unjustifiably reduce the provisional equitable share allocated by 17.7 billion to cater for the bailing of SAA to the tune of 10.5 billion. Reducing budget for provinces despite municipalities struggling to meet service delivery needs is a clear indication that this is indeed an illogical bill. Therefore, Chairperson, the EFF reject the bill. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. will be followed by Honorable Mama Rekhane. Honorable Mama Rekhane.
Thanks, Honorable Chairperson. Thanks, Chairperson, Honorable Chairperson of the Council. Honorable Minister Tito Mboweni, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, the African National Congress supports the Division of Revenue Second Amendment Bill B24-2020. Honorable Chairperson, allow me to honor the departed and the families who have lost their loved ones to the coronavirus pandemic, as well as the victims of violence against women and children. The world will only become a better place when the majority speak out and act courageously to protect the health and the lives of the most vulnerable in society from the virus and from the second pandemic, gender-based violence and femicide. As our forebears understood that freedom will never be complete until the women, children, elderly, and the poorest of the poor of the country also feel included and protected from the violence, extreme poverty, and lack of opportunity. COVID-19 has proven this point beyond any doubt. The centrality of the women's emancipation in order to achieve a truly national democratic society was what prompted the late Isilandwe Siaparangwe, the father of the democratic South African nation, Tata Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, to observe, open quotes, the legacy of oppression weighs heavily on women. As long as women are bound by poverty and as long as they are looked down upon, human rights will lack substance. As long as the nation refuses to acknowledge the equal role of more than half of itself, it's doomed to failure, close quote. Honorable members, the once in a lifetime event of COVID-19 caught everyone by surprise. This one is a catastrophe which was challenged the health and economies of the entire world and changed what humanity regards as normal, perhaps permanently. No amount of statistical and economic trick for forecasting would have predicted the economic situation we are finding ourselves in today. Honorable members, the budget presented by the Minister of Finance in February had to be adjusted in June because of the unprecedented event. And now a second division of revenue amendment bill is being considered. We must acknowledge that government has shown its agility in midst of the storm of mobilizing all resources to face the invisible enemy and the economic fallout it has caused. When this bill was formulated, it is clear that hard choices and trade-offs had to be made. So what characterizes this period and consequently the bill? That is, we're in precarious economic and fiscal position. Work government has done and is doing to save lives. The plan for the economic reconstruction and recovery aims to transform South Africa and generations, and we all need to focus on this goal. Honorable members, government intervention have been massive. First and foremost, it provided safety nets for its citizens, especially the poorest of the poor, and also assisted businesses in distress. We must not forget that an unprecedented situation required unprecedented measures. Our people who would have had no income to provide food for their families have appreciated the 350 Rand grant to millions of unemployed South Africans. The COVID-19 temporary employment relief scheme, which benefited over 11 million workers and 4 million companies, and 70 billion rand tax relief that was provided to businesses. Honorable members, we agree with organized labor that support business cannot be a blank check. The least we expect from the businesses is to protect jobs, especially under these trying times. It will be very unfortunate if workers are retrenched as a first resort rather than the last. Honorable members, we urge all those involved with SABC to do everything to save the 400 jobs which are under threat. It is the time when everyone should come to the party to save as many jobs as possible while creating new jobs. This we do with some concern that we have expressed on this podium. However, we believe in the intervention that the ANC government, working together with social partners, has embarked upon to build and maintain infrastructure and create jobs. Intervention at local government level. There is always a danger of governing over the people and people reducing them to passive recipients of state handouts. The ANC has understood the pitfall, hence we introduced democratic organs of self-government in the local sphere of government. This was to implement the injunction of the Freedom Charter that, open quote, all bodies of minority rule, advisory boards, council, and authorities shall be replaced by democratic organs of self-government, close quote. The local sphere of government affords the people the greatest opportunity to participate and shape government programs and policies in order to support our local government. Many of which are struggling from departments, enterprises, and households must pay their dues to municipalities. It is unacceptable that municipalities are owned a staggering 191
We'll ask the table net to assist, but please try to speak to the speaker
a total
and be a bit clearer.
12 reproviders into the. Okay, thanks, Chairperson. Bill into the indirect component of the water services infrastructure grant for implementation of various water services interventions. As we know, water has been the ally municipalities from the bill that a total of 390 million rand is rolled over in the commitment to bulk infrastructure related projects in Nelson Mandela Bay Metropolitan Municipality. This is a response of the cries of communities in the metro for better and reliable municipal services. The local government must act as an enabler of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan. Municipal authorities must become more capable performing their functions, such as zoning of businesses and giving out licenses, bulk services provision, and reliability of the basic services provided. So local government has the potential to unleash the creativity and energies of people to partake in the work of building their communities and towns ravaged by the pandemic. This requires the activating of the organs of self-government, such as civic organization, ward forums, hospital communities, police forums, sports association, and cooperatives. The importance of financial accountability. There are many deficiencies in the supply processes of government, and many of these were amplified by the introduction of the emergency procurement processes allowed by PPE to protect people from coronavirus. There is always the danger in the public sector of overpricing, potential fraud, and supply chain sidestepped. In addition, delays in the delay and quality of goods and services must be avoided through better planning and management of supplies going forward. Public procurement can be used strategically to develop local industries and empower millions of people. For example, the incentive grants framework of work of both provincial and local conditional grants could be enhanced in order to strengthen localization. They should attach condition that expenditure must support the procurement of goods only if they are made for assembled locally within the South African borders to stimulate the domestic economy and encourage job growth while taking international trade agreements into account. Wage bill matter and the credibility of the MTBPS and budget. We call on government and organized labor to engage on a continuous basis until
towards closing or conclusion, Honorable Marijan.
In conclusion, we trust that this adjusted bill will contribute towards the reconstruction and recovery of our economy. I so thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you very much.
Chairperson, Minister, comrades and friends. Chairperson, from Mr. Dennis Ryder, it's once again, same old, same old. And so, of course, I have to also reply same old, as I've done repeatedly since I think it was June last year, in response to most of what he says, which is exactly in different forms what he has previously said. The day Mr. Ryder offers something original and new, Chairperson, don't be surprised if I fall off my chair. It will not be indecorous. It would not be my fault. It will be Mr. Ryder's fault because he so traumatized me that he said something new that I got so shocked that I would fall off the chair. But I promise I shall reassemble myself in the chair and continue to engage with him. Although I look forward to that day, which I doubt, Chairperson, ever going to happen in this 5-year term. Now, our province, KwaZulu-Natal, has, in very difficult circumstances, as the committee itself, the Select Committee on Appropriations had to also contend with, is deal with this process in a very truncated, over-condensed form. Now, of course, we as a province recognize, as indeed does the National Committee, Select Committee, that there were special circumstances here. I mean, Mr. Ryder might want to think about this too. I think the sense I have is, well, it was nowhere near this global pandemic, but there was the so-called Spanish flu of 1918. That, if my mathematics is correct at all, for somebody who got an E in maths in matric, is 102 years ago. So we had a special and even more challenging circumstance now than they had in 1918. So of course the minister, for various reasons, including the complexities of negotiating a budget, could not deliver the budget on time. So it was a week later, which means we got substantially challenged by the erosion of space and time for us to deal with this budget. But the legislature met, and finally yesterday in the House, in KZN, in the legislature, voted for the Division of Revenue, while expressing reservations about it, which I will deal with in a moment. But the first thing I'd like to say in response to Mr. Mania, Mr. Ryder, is that, he makes much of the fact that this lockdown was overdone and unnecessary and so on. Now, frankly, right now, in the countries that he and his party admire so much, the Trump of the US, the Johnson and the UK, and the rest of these rampant free marketeers, which even our minister will shrink away from. You know, what's going on there right now, Chairperson? The whole world knows, even the peasants in Mongolia know this, right? I mean, I happen to be multitasking, Chairperson. Last night, or was it this morning? I'm not as good as young people are, so I was typing, and I'm not sure I got all this right. But if what I saw on Al Jazeera, or was it BBC, I can't recall, is correct, if what I've got is correct, the UK, no less, a developed country of that stature, is expected to have a minus 11.2% growth rate next year. That's even worse than us. It was said by the journalist or the finance minister there that this is the biggest collapse of GDP in over 300 years. It was said too, if I'm correct, that there's a possibility that public sector workers, not that I'm supporting such a thing personally, not that my province has mandated me to do this either, but Mr. Ryder is speaking there as a DA, and I am an ANC member, so I'm speaking in my capacity as an ANC member. And here it is. You know, I don't support necessarily this, but all I can tell you is that there's some suggestion that public sector workers in the UK might also experience cuts in their salaries, except interestingly, healthcare workers and those who are in the front line, as it were. So now, if his own models of rampant free marketism, countries of the West, developed world, are in the trouble they are, he might want to ask himself, why? Why? What was this fellow Trump up to, President Trump, fortunately ex-President Trump of the United States soon? What were they doing? Turning a blind eye to it, right? Believing that all that matters is growth. Never mind that people's lives are lost and others are afflicted for the rest of their lives by being infected, even if they don't die. What was Boris Johnson up to, Prime Minister of Great Britain? These are the people they admire. On the other hand, we took a very sensible decision and we're in a much better place right now in the very province that they lead, sadly, and the province that we lead, Eastern Cape. But let's take the Western Cape, which prides itself some sort of federal enclave on its own, managing this COVID-19 better than the national state did. Well, there are many reasons why the Western Cape dealt with things in the way that it did, which have nothing to do with the leadership so much as, yes, the leadership was good, never mind that they are from an opposition party, but it's other structural and objective circumstances and the conditions of the Western Cape that provide for it. It doesn't have the challenges that Gauteng has with its overdense, intensified spatial occupation by informal settlements and by people, many of whom are migrants from outside this country. Understandable though it be that they end up, Chairperson, in your city of Johannesburg. But again and again, the issue arises, why can't we, in circumstances that are worse than 102 years ago when that major pandemic came, why can't we work together despite our differences? I mean, to play unnecessary political football with the way we manage the COVID-19, it's not a here nor there. Western Cape and Eastern Cape right now, a phenomenal rise. I think I saw yesterday, it's a 52% increase in the Western Cape, led by the DA. Does it really matter ultimately? They love cooing about the premier or premier, what's it? The head of the provincial government there in the Western Cape, as if somehow, they have skills that the rest of the country doesn't, not least the national government. So, of course, we all agree on the need for the review of the formula, Minister. We know that this review has been taking place endlessly. We know there are many problems at local government level and municipal level. We've been there consistently since '94. We know those issues. The issue, though, is now that COVID has hit us the way it has, and now that it's impacting the way it is on municipalities more especially, the equitable share needs to be reviewed much more on a different basis. When we were reviewing the equitable share up till February this year, we had no COVID. So what the committee feels and what our province obviously supports is a review of the equitable share, particularly as it applies to municipalities, because National Treasury, obviously nobody, not even the most foresighted, anticipated the destructive effects of COVID-19. So shouldn't there be a review now of the equitable share, Minister, given that we are where we are with COVID and the fact that it's going to persist? Now, on the issue of SAA, the EFF is attacking this and so is the DA. Now, look, this matter is being addressed. I think people are trying to find trade-offs. Many of these issues belong to the Public Enterprises Select Committee and Portfolio Committee. I'm not sure that we fully understand all the complexities. It doesn't matter at the end of the day what we say. 10.5 billion has been taken, and the province's minister, chairperson, are right to say, why must we bear the consequences? But we are one country, we're not a federal state. So these are issues we need to address. And the EFF makes much of the fact that it's a proletariat party. Are they? I mean, let's not enter that debate, Mr. Maletsane. But if you are, surely you would protect the rights of workers in SAA. Actually, ultimately, who's going to suffer the most? It's the workers, really, of SAA. And so to some extent, we have no choice, the government and the parliament. We have to ensure that the workers don't suffer the consequences for the responsibilities of the SAA board, the ministers concerned, government and parliament, ourselves, you and me, and so on. On the issue of the public sector wage bill, we did engage extraneously on this matter with Mr. Ryder, and in fact, we did the same on the fiscal framework. He will argue, well, we're looking at the division of revenue now, and this issue came up in the provinces, as indeed, Chairperson, it came up in my province. KZN also expressed its concern. It said that the big concern is that 5 billion is going away from our provincial allocation in terms of the PES, the provincial equitable share. And we feel that if the negotiations don't work out, our province should not bear the consequences and so on. So, Chairperson, it's unreasonable though, while our province has raised these things, it doesn't agree with Mr. Ryder's view.
As you conclude,
Chairperson, we respect the public service bargaining process. We respect the very laws we passed. Parliament cannot supplant the negotiation process. Let that take its place. We can't supplant the courts. Let the courts decide. If it doesn't work out in favor of government and the unions amicably, they will negotiate. If they fail to negotiate, yes, there will be some other form of a special appropriations bill. It won't be the first time. It won't be the last time. There are special circumstances for it, and we understand. Why don't they? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bonge Karim.
Speaker is Honorable
From
Thank you, Honorable House Chairperson and members of this House, and thank you for the opportunity to represent the Western Cape. The Western Cape is the best run government in the country, Honorable Karim, and I must say your comments are quite rich. Somebody who served under the Zuma government was responsible for giving the mess that we are in today. So I would be the last person to speak, but I'm here to debate on the division of revenue bill. I can easily debate you on all the mistakes you've made, but I'm not going to go there. House Chairperson, it was evident in the first adjustment budget that the African National Congress is all talk and no walk. When they left the Western Cape and provinces on their own to fund the COVID-19 health responses. Now with the Division of Revenue Second Amendment Bill tabled on the 28th of October, the response was no different to when the Western Cape provincial budget was cut by an additional 1.5 billion, that being the total financial cuts by national government to 3.5 billion. During the medium-term budget policy statement last year, and in fact, for every budget address delivered since our economy was left to dry by the ANC, economists and residents alike carefully watched with hope if the ANC was able to build a ladder from the hole which the governing party dug itself and ourselves into. Have they done as much, Honorable Karim? Nearly 200 billion could have been saved instead of bailing out failing SOEs. Instead, a year ago, the president vowed to not let any SOE fail, saying it hosts great assets and skilled people. Yet the recovery plans could not spare employees of SOEs of retrenchment. The last time the national carrier, Honorable Karim, made profit was in 2011. And Eskom's debt is just over 450 billion rand. We are in a mess. But again, the 2020 MTTBS provide another 10.5 billion towards SAA. Chairperson, I fail to understand how there is a need for SAEs that have become nothing but an expensive black hole. And even when bailed out, it still fails to create employment or provides its mandated services. So how does Honorable Karim says that the KZN is going to lose 5 billion, but he seemed to be okay with it? I don't get it. While many argue SOEs are not the solution, the ANC saves cadres year on year, while the problem with SOEs has become synonymous with activities of state capture and corruption. And there is where the Western Cape government is different. We don't steal. Our SG is not in front of the courts for corruption, Honorable Karim.
What does it have to do with this?
Make these remarks As he speaks,
You must
years
stop
of
it.
failure,
You must
left
stop it.
the tabling of another impossible division of revenue. Against the backdrop of debt to the value of 3 million, over 3 trillion of the last 10 years, the interest spent to
What
service
about
the debt
Brackenfell?
equals to what is spent on our healthcare. And these are very unfortunate implications for the provincial budget. And it's quite sad that two provinces, the Free State and Limpopo, which are known as the Stamboweni, always tweet about Limpopo, the two of these provinces
What about Brackenfell?
to meet. They didn't bother to meet to discuss something so severe that billions of rands will be taken from their own provinces, affecting health, clinical, the police services, and they didn't even bother to meet to discuss this second division of revenue bill. It is actually disgraceful. Deputy House Chairperson, the net decrease
Are you talking about Brackenfell?
22 million from both the first and second adjustment sacrificed the building of new school roads and infrastructure. No increase of funds has been allocated to the Western Cape Education Department in the second adjustment budget. For a province with a leading education department,
that's why Brackenfell happened.
Growth of Leuven's from other provinces, and while maintaining its vision for quality education nonetheless. There was a further net decrease of 82 million in grants to the Western Cape local government in the second adjustment budget. This, the House Chairperson, was notwithstanding the grant in allocations to local government severely will hamper service delivery. In the provincial health sector, we have to be honest, we welcome the net increase for the HIV, TB, malaria, and community service outreach grant. However, in the second adjustment budget, both grants for tertiary services and for training of development will be cut by a further 41 million rand during a pandemic. And that is just shameful. And given the state of policing in South Africa, the ANC and the Good Alliance deem it appropriate to cut the budget for SAPS, despite the fact gang murders, we see trucks are being burnt on a daily basis, safety in our communities, in our farming communities. That we all, as members of parliament, we should be worried, we should have sleepless nights that during a pandemic, we cut services to these crucial frontline items in our country for a failing entity. Chairperson, at this stage, I'm only mentioning some of the frontline and priority areas.
You have done.
In the agricultural sector, which took front stage, the reason all of us can sit here today, still breathe, because we can eat, is that those sector, the agricultural sector, faces cuts of 522 million when you combine both the first and second adjustment budget. House Chairman, in the first adjustment budget, the Western Cape government received drought relief funding amounting to 25 million from the provincial disaster relief grant. However, that amount was inadequate to address the drought in the Western Cape. So we had to use from our own provincial revenue fund to bolster the drought relief funding. That is what's called good governance. You're able to have a reserve because you govern well, and we could use some of those funds. In the second adjustment budget,
on the basis of separate development,
provincial government received no funding from the drought relief. From these cuts and indecisive economic reform strategies, provincial government and certainly the National Treasury have to go and find the money for the political decision made by the national government. And in that regard, the other day, and I think I printed a tweet from the minister himself, where he said, do we need SAA? Days after, for the weeks after allocating 10 billion to SAA, suddenly the minister realized, oh my God, do we need SAA? Water under the bridge, the axe been broken. This practice undermines the whole budget process and places severe fiscal pressure on the Treasury officials and on provincial governments. I'm aware that a budget can only do so much. But what we need, Honorable House Chairperson, is a capable government, serious about fixing the deep tragedy of corruption, and one able to table a
and
plan
what about racism?
Real acceleration growth. This is especially significant when the world forecasts economic contraction of 7.1% during 2020 and a prediction by the OECD of a 7.6% contraction under the resurgence of COVID-19. But the hard truth, House Chairman, is economic growth under the leadership of the ANC has been disappointing for years before COVID-19. And we can no longer afford to be both constrained and indecisive. Indecisive economic policy has led to sluggish economic growth, but budgets funded by debt cannot adequately address priorities in the country. So many experts have showed that bailing out SOEs is wrong fit for the country.
What about separate
SOE will be receiving the 10.5 billion from the national government, while previously it received billions, I think it was 37 billion in bailouts in the last few years. Along with my opening remarks on the microeconomic trajectory, it is immoral to allocate funds to SAA, while essential provincial and local government programs are being cut by the national government. The Western Cape government vehemently opposes the SAA bailout and requests that these funds be reallocated by National Treasury to all provinces in terms of the current provincial equitable share. House Chairperson, during the second division of Revenue Bill, Minister Mboweni made a crucial announcement. And I think because of the SAA, a lot of people didn't pick up on those important announcements that he made. And he said, government will present legislation next year to allow for limited pre-retirement withdrawals under certain circumstances linked to mandatory preservation requirements, close quote. And that is something that we've been fighting for in the Western Cape. And I hope that the minister will today share some of these ideas as to how South Africans can start applying their minds to access their pension fund before any government access their pension fund. People do not have the luxury to wait until next year. People are battling. The middle class is now the new poor. And the only reason we can get them out of the current poor situation that they are in, allowing those individuals pre-retirement withdrawals, a fixed amount, so that they can get themselves out of the hole that sadly the government has dug themselves into. I trust that Honorable Minister Mboweni, this can be finalized speedily, as a proposal already received the report from the unions and the private sector. The middle class in many instances want to access their pension fund, and the Western Cape government is in full support of this move, and Minister Mboweni can find us as an ally in getting this legislation through urgently. Chairperson, with this said, the Western Cape government cannot morally support this budget. Not only does this bill has been processed under a rubber stamp exercise, rushed through, it does not take into account the true challenges the Western Cape and the country faces. Therefore, we cannot support this bill. I thank you.
The biggest loser.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Honorable P. Ngomane. But as Ngomane prepares himself, I now hand over to Honorable Lucas. Honorable Ngomane.
Chairperson, thank you for the opportunity. Honorable members, let me begin by expressing my appreciation to the Ministry of Finance and all who helped in preparing the national budget. I would also like to thank all members of the NCOP and our provincial legislature for their contribution and counsel, which helped shape our input in this debate. Chairperson, the recent global events have reminded us that our economies are interdependent. The impact of coronavirus and adverse development in the global and domestic economy have resulted in unprecedented challenges to the fiscals this year. As the minister indicated in his medium-term budget policy statement in October 2020, our economy woes will deepen further if we do not act now. We have an obligation as prescribed in the Freedom Charter to contribute in any way possible to make South Africa a better place for all. As we continue to battle this invisible virus, which has limited our movement and disrupted economic activities, we must also strengthen our defense of national fiscals to ward off challenges of the present and the future. Despite the resources constraints arising from the budget cuts, our principal position as the province is to support all efforts of managing the risk of the fiscal outlook and set the country on the path of economic recovery and growth. Chairperson, as we have indicated to this House previously, the province takes note of the reduction in the equitable share, but equally welcomes additional funds to various types of conditional grants as indicated in the bill. Chairperson, the provincial government has therefore reprioritized funds to respond to the reduction in the equitable share as well as the decline in the province's own revenue collection. Since the beginning of the lockdown, the province has lost a sizable number of jobs. According to State South Africa, the province recorded job losses in construction, manufacturing, trade, and also in tourism sector during the second quarter of 2020. As part of the response, the Executive Council has approved the Provincial Economic Recovery and Growth Plan. We have also provided additional resources through our adjustment budget to respond to the adverse impact of COVID-19 related impact to the tourism industry in the province. The allocation of funds is special towards the Presidential Empowerment Initiative is most welcome, as it will assist us to save jobs in the education sector and expand public employment programs to young people in the province. Chairperson, the community health workers play a critical role in the continuing efforts to expand healthcare to our people. We believe that additional funds to the sector, as provided through the bill, will not only boost our continuing response to COVID-19, but make a contribution to stave off persistent challenges of joblessness. Chairperson, the fiscal consolidation will be the most difficult but a necessary intervention to secure the future of the next generation free from unsustainable debt burden. The only choice when resources are put to good use and that there is value for money in everything that we do. Mpumalanga supports the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan and endorsed the Division of Revenue Second Amendment Bill as tabled. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much.
Yes, let me see.
We will now call on Honorable SF de Tooy of the Freedom Front Plus to continue with the debate.
Agbare Voorsitter, the Division of Revenue Second Amendment Bill. The name of this bill highlights the reason of one of the largest contributors to the current financial dilemma that South Africa and the South African municipalities, to be more specific, finds ourselves in: amendment. Under the ANC government, there have been so many populist amendments to the financial approaches and the developments to win votes instead of really improving living conditions. There have been so many temporary job creation initiatives by government shortly before elections, while government itself is to blame for job losses and unemployment. Agbare Voorsitter, Suid-Afrika het op 'n punt gekom waar selfs die ANC-regeerde provinsies, soos byvoorbeeld die Vrystaat, buite stemming bly met voorlegging van die verdeling van staatsinkomste wetsontwerp aan die wetgewer. Hulle voer aan dat maandag slegs vir partypolitieke aangeleenthede gebruik moet word en dat daar nie oor staatskwessies gestem kan word nie. Belaglik. Eie belange word bo die belange van die provinsies en die land gestel. Die ANC se belange word weer eens bo die van Suid-Afrika gestel. Hier word vir die soveelste keer oor fondse getwis wat na dieselfde provinsies en munisipaliteite toe gaan, wat die vorige fondse in die eerste plek geplunder, verkoos en in baie gevalle aangewend het. Chair, it's evident from the presentations that were made to Parliament on this bill that the South African economic outlook has deteriorated further since the tabling of the Special Adjustments budget in July 2020, and that the real GDP is now expected to contract by 7.8% in 2020 compared to 7.2% as projected in the July 2020 budget. SALGA confirmed that the sharp downturn in the domestic economy follows a decade of economic stagnation and measures taken by the ANC government during the COVID period that resulted in steep declines in consumption, investment, and exports. Chair, funding municipalities is a problem. The small tax base of municipalities and the culture of non-payment is a huge problem. The way funds are being spent and the people spending these funds is of mammoth concern. Die land se finansiële krisis sal nie opgelos word alvorens daadwerklike stappe geneem word om die dik gevrete roes uit die stelsel te verwyder nie. Die ANC Finansieringssyndikaat het die raamwerk van gesonde finansiële bestuur en billike dienslewering tot so 'n mate vernietig dat slegs die eysterwurm skilvers oorgebly het. Hierdie begroting sal addisionele befondsing aan provinsies is onvoldoende en sal nie suksesvol aangewend word nie, aangesien daar geen daadwerklike beplanning en prioritisering van die noodsaaklike infrastruktuurprojekte is nie. Chair, Minister Mboweni was truthful when he stated that the South African economy is in a danger zone as any fiscal slippage could lead to debt reaching 100% of GDP or greater. Where are we now, Chair? Tans dreig Eskom om munisipale kragtoevoer na sommige munisipaliteite weens wanbetaling op te skort. Eskom wat miljarde rande onder andere veronderstel was om munisipale infrastruktuur te verbeter en die ekonomie te stimuleer, opgeslurp het. Provinsies moet ook opdok vir hierdie tydelike werksgeleenthede, naamlik die presidensiële werkskepingsinisiatief. Dit kos die Noordwes-provinsie 1.5 miljard rand. 10.5 miljard sal vir SAL, die ANC se eystervoël vol roes, tussen die 9 provinsies bymekaar geskraap moet word. In Noordwes, een van die swak presterende provinsies in die land, moes 1.3 miljard hiervoor afstaan. Nou sê minister Gordhan dat die vleienierskorps getransformeer moet word na swart, in plaas daarvan dat daar na meriete en kundigheid gekyk word. Selfs die gemeenskapsbiblioteke en die titelakte finansiële toedelings is ook nie gespaar nie, voorsitter. Die roesvoël moet vlieg, hulle toedelings is ook in die slag. We need functional municipalities to ensure economic growth. We need functional municipalities. We will never have economic growth and job creation without them. We are on the edge of a fiscal cliff, Chair. This bill will not solve South Africa's problems. Your children and their children will bear the brunt of the ANC's corrosive governance. The decaying statues of dismay and poverty will crouch over the ruins of local government. This will be your legacy. This is your legacy. The Freedom Front Plus rejects this bill. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Dutoy. Before we continue, all of us agree that this sitting is a sitting of the House of the National Council of Provinces. So according to the powers and privileges that we enjoy, could we request the Honorable Klute to withdraw his comment that he made in the chat room? Honorable Klute, it is not allowed, it's not parliamentary what you have just said, and we don't know on what basis you have said that. So if you can withdraw that. Councillor Mondlane of Salga will be the next speaker. Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes.
So if
loud and clear.
Yes.
The next speaker will be from Salga, Councillor Mondlane. Is the speaker on the platform?
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, we can hear you now. Continue.
No, thank you very much, Chair. My apologies. I thought you were saying you are requesting the honorable member to withdraw first what he said, and I'll come after that.
He put it on the chat room. Let him withdraw it from the chat room.
Okay. No, thank you, Honorable Deputy Chairperson. Let me send my greetings to you, send my greetings to the Minister and Deputy Ministers in the House, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen. Chair Salga, we are aware of the gloomy economical and fiscal outlook and acknowledge the significant negative impact that COVID-19 has had on the economy. Salga supports the active management of debt so that the debt burden does not spiral out of control. The difficult decision of budget or spending cuts needs consideration, even though there's vast challenges on the ground around poverty, basic service delivery, health, and education. But as a country, we ought to take some tough decisions, taking into account sustainability of the country in the long term, that these have to be considered as long as it is done in a manner that is fair and equitable across the entire public sector and has the most minimal impact possible on local government, as it is the closest sphere providing service delivery to people on the ground. The state's capacity to provide social assistance and free basic services needs to be adjusted in order to fall within the constraints of the current economic and operating environment. The debt that is owed to local government is around 191.5 billion as at 30 June 2020, and the current prevailing operating environment is leading to an even more difficulty for municipalities to collect debts that are owed to them. South African economic outlook has deteriorated further since the tabling of the special adjustment budget in July 2020. The potential impact of the 2020 MTBPS on local government finances is that it is likely to cause further deterioration due to the reduction of local government conditional grants totaling to 613 million in order to contribute towards funding the 10.5 billion rescue plan for South African Airways. Chair, this is something SALGA strongly disagrees with because it's bearing on the poor and already ailing financial health of municipalities. Should government want to bail out South African Airways, then the funds needs to be found from the national sphere of government and more specifically from the national state-owned entity space, not the local government space. It should not be, local government should not be expected to contribute to this given the funding gap challenges that are already confronting local government. Furthermore, with local government in this financial distress that is in, there has not been any bailouts, even though it is the sphere closest to the people providing basic service delivery to the economy as well as the citizens. In addition, the MTBPS seemed to be silent on measures to provide relief to local government for the impact of COVID-19 in relation to revenue recovery. It must be noted, Chairperson, that unfunded mandates are further exacerbating due to cuts on conditional grants because the responsibility to fulfill the function is still remaining, but the funding, which was insufficient to begin with, is now being further cut. While SALGA continues to support local government through its involvement in several intergovernmental structures and initiatives, SALGA is calling for the creation of a parliamentary working group to critically review the current architecture and funding model for local government based on the current fiscal reality of local government. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honorable Councillor.
Okay.
The next speaker will be Honorable W.A.S. Oka. Mr. Oka.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister, members of this House, people of South Africa. A well-known song goes, catch a falling star, put it in your pocket, save it for a rainy day. Catch a falling star, put it in your pocket, never let it fade away. Honorable Chairperson, not only did this ANC government neglected to save some money for a rainy day, they also allowed all our money to fade away. This Division of Revenue Second Amendment Bill again shines the spotlight on the fact that the ANC completely destroyed this country financially. Everyone in the ANC sat in silence and watched how corruption and mismanagement thrived over the years, especially during the Zuma era, but yet they did nothing. Now it's again the people of South Africa that has to bear the brunt for the ANC's failures. The Honorable Karim said that my colleague, Honorable Ryder, did not come up with something new. Well, maybe Honorable Karim, if you think about it, this might be due to the fact that the ANC is repeating and making the same mistakes over and over again. We cannot come up with something new because you make the same mistakes. The DA has to continuously show you the way of good governance. Honorable Karim, I will fall off my chair the day that this ANC government starts to govern our finances properly. Honorable Chairperson, the timeline of this process that our committee was subjected to was very, very rushed. To give 1 day for provinces to move from negotiating mandates to final mandates shows us that this process was not taken seriously. Provincial legislatures should be able to make an impact on decisions and not only be a rubber stamp in order to get processes finalized. The Northern Cape Provincial Legislature did not even bother to invite me as their permanent member to the NCOP on the Appropriations Committee to address them on this bill. And even after I have asked them to allow me to address them, it still did not happen. Honorable Chairperson, the Free State decided to abstain from giving a mandate on this bill. And as an excuse, as it was said, they said that they could not convene the committee due to the fact that Mondays are there for political work. What a shame. We are talking about the finances of our country and they want to go and do party political work. What a shame. The Limpopo province could not even get a quorum in order for them to deliberate the mandate to us. This just goes to show, Honorable Chairperson, the disdain with which the ANC is handling the finances of our provinces as well as our country. Honorable Deputy Chairperson, a further worrying factor in these processes is the fact that the inputs that provinces do make are to no avail. As an example of this ignorance towards the requests of our provinces, we just have to look at the numerous amounts of times that provinces had unsuccessfully raised concerns on their frustrations with the drawn-out review of the provincial equitable share formula. Various provinces have in the past frequently requested that the rural nature of certain provinces must be taken into consideration in a new provincial equitable share formula. Yet, Treasury is dragging its feet with us. In the final mandate of the Northern Cape, where you and me both come from, Honorable Deputy Chair, as well as in the final mandates of several other provinces, the need for drought relief was emphasized. During the process of the first Division of Revenue Amendment Bill earlier this year, the Select Committee on Appropriations was united in our sentiments that more needed to be done in order for provinces to obtain additional funding to minimize the effects that the prolonged drought had on our country. Yet, to date, absolutely nothing was done in this regard. This is just, therefore, another indication that what is discussed and agreed in this House falls upon deaf ears. Agbare Dank, Voorsitter, gedurende Januarie hierdie jaar is die Noord-Kaap tot 'n droogte rampgebied verklaar. En gedurende Februarie is die res van die land ook as rampgebied verklaar wat droogte aanbetref. Daar is egter groot gedeeltes van ons land wat sedert hierdie rampverklarings steeds laer as gemiddelde reënval gehad het en steeds gebuk gaan onder die langste droogte in ons geskiedenis. Die droogte rampstatus het egter gedurende Mei hierdie jaar verval. En ondanks verskeie versoeke van die DA af dat die Noord-Kaap en ander areas in ons land wat steeds gebuk gaan onder die knellende droogte, dat daardie gebiede weer as droogte rampgebiede verklaar moet word, is dit steeds nie gedoen nie. Daar het absoluut geen verbetering gekom vir daardie boere nie. Trouwens, hulle omstandighede het verder agteruit gegaan. Ons land se voedselsekerheid word hierdeur bedreig. En verskeie mense gaan by ons land se steeds groeiende werkloosheidssyfer gevoeg word indien daar nie spoedig hulp aan ons droogtegeteisterde landbousektor verleen word nie. Agbare minister, die DA is uiters teleurgesteld dat ons land se boere in nood weer eens oor die hoof gesien word. Nie net word daar aan die provinsies nie addisionele befondsing aan hulle gegee nie om die landbousektor by te staan nie, maar daar word befondsing wat vroeër aan die provinsies gegee is om die landbousektor by te staan, word nou besnoei. Honorable Minister, all this is happening whilst our people are again witnessing how 10.5 billion rand of their money is once again spent on a failed state-owned enterprise like South African Airways. The DA has on many occasions in the past warned that the continuous bailing out of failing state-owned enterprises like the SAA, Eskom, Denel, SABC, we can go on, that will have a negative effect on service delivery in our country. This concern from the DA was again confirmed in this bill when funding to municipalities was cut in order to pay for the mismanagement of SAA. This government continues to throw money in the bottomless pit of state-owned enterprises, rather than to spend that money on the delivery of service to our people. Even Salga, the previous speaker, is now agreeing with us that that should stop. Honorable Chairperson, one of the biggest votes of no confidence in this government's ability to manage our finances properly was done when credit rating agencies once again downgraded our economic outlook. Investment confidence is hampered by government's plans of expropriation without compensation, corruption, the national health insurance, and a total lack of consequence management. This government, its spending remains too high for the tax base, and expenditure is skewed towards compensation rather than investment. These downgrades will again have the effect that our country pays more towards debt servicing costs, which will again reduce the money that we should have that must go towards service delivery to our people in need. Honorable Deputy Chairperson, this is a vicious circle that must be stopped. These downgrades will not just go away in time, Honorable Minister. Stabilizing our debt in order to avoid these downgrades will involve significant expenditure reductions across government. Concrete steps need to be taken in order to create an environment that's going to attract investment in our country rather than to chase it away. Honorable Chairperson, when I last addressed this House on the previous adjustment budget, I said that this budget could be compared to my golfing skills. Nothing is on target, it's always in the rough and never on par. And Honorable Chairperson, just like my golfing skills did not improve at all since I last spoke to this House, this budget is not showing any improvements either. The Democratic Alliance does not support this bill. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Okam. We will now call on Honorable Zetem Kiva of the African National Congress.
Yes.
Malibongwe.
Malibongwe. Tell them.
Mandithathe lithuba ndibulise kuwe mbhexeshi walendlu ibaluleke kangaka yeli lizwe yowiso mthetho. Ndibulise kumphathiswa ojongene nezimali nobutyebi belizwe lethu uba uTito Mboweni. Ndibulise kumalungu abekekileyo alendlu onke ephela. Ndandule ndibulise kubantu baseMzantsi Afrika belizwe lakokwethu esizingcayo ngalo. In his opening address to the national dialogue to mark the 16 days of no violence against women and children yesterday, the President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, reminded the country that the choices we face are both complex and simple at the same time. With regard to violence against women and children, it appears as a simple problem that we can bring to an immediate end if every man makes a conscious decision never to harm a woman or a child and lives by that decision. But reality is also complex because we have entrenched societal attitudes and practices that are hard to root out. We also have poverty and unemployment amongst many young men and women. An unemployed man who suffers from the inferiority complex feels excluded from society and is often angry and violent at times. Of course, violence against women and children is not an exclusive act of poor people. The rich too are violent behind the closed doors and high walls of their residences. While nothing can justify any act of violence against a fellow human being, the African National Congress believes that a just society will better address the root causes of many of the social ills we have today. In this moment of national reconstruction and recovery, We must stay focused on the actions we need to take to transform South Africa into a nation that affords equal and fair opportunities for all citizens. This moment of recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic is similar to an aftermath of a war. It is a period in which true patriots always put their differences aside and agree to focus on the broad national goals. Akwenzeki lento yenziwa ngamalungu amele amaqela aphikisayo. Awusoloko ekhonkotha nokokubana ilizwe lintyumpa-ntyumpeka engxakini yento kokubana umnotho wethu uye wathi thaxa phansi ngoku siyawumilisela kwakhona ngokutsha ukuqinisekisa into kokubana siyabakhonza abantu bethu ngendlela evokothekileyo. Bathetha ngongathi bangabantu abangayaziyo into ehlele elilizwe nehlabathi liphela. Iyaxakisa into yabantu abalolo hlobo babonakala bengabantu abalithileyo ilizwe labo asinababiza njengoba bangamathandazwe. But history teaches us that post-war moments also create opportunities and as well as opportunists whose narrow self-interest is elevated above national interest. They blow their horns and seek to promote themselves as the messiahs who hold all the wisdom, if only the masses could entrust them with political power. Ilento yenziwa ngoba uRider up, no Ocamp, no Dutoit. Bazenza ingathi ngongqondo abanezisombululo yento yonke efuneka yenziwe eMzantsi Afrika. Elo xesha abanalo nelinye ilivo namava okokubana bangakhe benze sibone. Uyazi into kokubana ukusukela ngonyaka ka-1994 yi-ANC kuphela ethe yaxhuzula imikhala apha isebenzela abantu bonke nobutyebi belizwe nezimali zelizwe eziqokelelwa eluntwini zisiya eluntwini lonke zingenambandlulo zingenamkhethe. Bona ke ingxaki yabo yinto kokubana bathelekisa iapile nepayinapile kuba kaloku ngethuba kwakuphethe abelungu kweli lizwe babethatha imali yobuzwe bonke yondle kuphela abantu abamhlophe, abantu abamnyama babekelwe ecaleni xa kusabiwa izithelo. Umahluko ke ngoku izinto zitshintshile, singurhulumente wabantu bonke kwaye xa sisenza izabelo sabela wonke umntu waseMzantsi Afrika ngendlela elinganayo. Post-war periods have given the world the Nazists in Germany and the fascists in Italy. The economic downturn and the deepening poverty of the working class in the United States of America gave rise to Donald Trump, who promised, like some of the political parties in this house which I've just mentioned, that he alone could solve the complex problems of that country. Within 4 years of running a country like a TV show, and more than 250,000 dead from COVID-19, the majority of American people woke up and voted him out of office as one of only 4 one-term presidents in the United States of America. Honorable Chairperson, I believe that despite the challenges we have, the majority of South Africans remain steadfast in the face of adversity, mainly because our people trust the African National Congress. There is steady leadership at the steering wheel that will sail this ship to safer waters out of a raging economic storm we are in. Our people will never be misled by some Omar Figizon who have never tasted the challenges of winning and then using political power to transform a colonized and racial divided society.
Yes.
Considering the division of the Revenue Second Amendment Bill, we hear the propaganda out there that the ANC government has indiscriminately cut funding to key service delivery programs in order to bail out South African Airways. This is totally untrue, and they know it. We don't even need to explain ourselves. We have done these cuts and these adjustments in order to be able to ensure that we fix our economy, we take it into the right trajectory insofar as the recovery plans as tabulated by the Minister of Finance. However, the truth is that in spite of the tight fiscal space, which objectively all the nations in the world are dealing with, the ANC government has shown the wisdom to allocate funds to programs that have greater potential to stimulate the economy and create jobs as part and parcel of the reconstruction and recovery effort. To name just a few, South Africans should be aware that the 7 billion has been allocated to education for school assistants. This is unprecedented and historic. This initiative will create 300,000 opportunities for young people to be engaged as education and school assistants throughout the country to help teachers with basic and routine work. This will allow educators more time to focus to teaching. Government has allocated a further 475 million for school infrastructure backlog grants under the Sanitation Appropriate for Education initiative. The ANC calls on the Department of Basic Education to strengthen the planning, monitoring, and delivery of the SAFE projects in all provinces equally. We must welcome the commitment of the 630 million for the creation of more than 60,000 jobs for labor-intensive maintenance and construction of municipal infrastructure and rural roads. Siyayivuyela lento. Lo rhulumente uyaqalisa ungena ngamandla ezilalini efaka indlela esemgangathweni zetha ezawuqinisekisa into okokubana uyawugcima umsantsa phakathi kwelali nedolophu. True to the ANC government's forward-looking character, an amount of 496 million is allocated to early childhood development. As it has been proven through empirical research, investment in ECDC is critical to breaking the generational poverty trap to which the majority of South Africans were relegated by colonialism and apartheid. Equally important, the bill dedicates 213 million to HIV interventions to preserve the lives of our people, again indiscriminately. Role of the provinces in the ERRP. The provinces and municipalities have to play a massive role in terms of the implementation of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan at a local level. The district development model will allow the different spheres of government to work in a more dynamic and efficient way. We call on government to consider institutionalizing the practice of real-time audits and consequence management for wrongdoing. This was a revolutionary reform and will remain a lasting legacy of the late Auditor General Kimi Makwetu. In our tribute to the late AG, we must enact legislation as Parliament to the effect that private companies found guilty of defrauding the state should be stopped from doing business with the state. They must also be named and shamed. You know what? During the apartheid era, the apartheid regime did not criminalize corruption. It is the ANC government that has made it a point that we criminalize corruption. It is us that have set up the Zondo Commission. Don't pretend as though it was you who came up with the idea of the commission. The ANC is vehemently committed in its fight against corruption in this country. The DA and Freedom Front Plus would obviously oppose this legislation. The DA and the Freedom Front Plus would obviously oppose this legislation because it is the crooked members of their constituency. It is the crooked members of their constituency who have been defrauding the state all the time, from the beginning of time. We are talking about the long-term contracts which they signed on the eve of the liberation of this country in order to milk the state, in order to bleed our resources, and they continue to do that. And now when we're trying our level best to transform and turn around our state-owned entities, they are screaming because they know that we are stopping the step. Yes, the government has taken a decision to build a new SAA, and we will do that. That will become a profitable and pay back over a period of time all the money that have been invested in by the South African taxpayers. The new airline will have a board, management, and staff who know the aviation sector, as well as a strategic equity partner that will bring capital, technology, and expertise. You need to be insensitive.
Different promises.
Stop making noise. You need to be sensitive to the fact that SAA is one of the biggest employers in this country. We cannot simply share the jobs there. We know that you are standing on the other side, so that SAA must collapse, and then you go on the other side to go and purchase it for your own personal benefits. We will not allow it to happen. And you like to make a point, and you continue to want to isolate Minister Tito Mboweni, when Minister Tito Mboweni is making contribution in the discourse and the discussion and the deliberations about the future of SAA. You quote him out of context. Minister Tito Mboweni is part of the collective.
Yes.
He does not have superpowers beyond that cabinet. He is one of the members of the cabinet, and he is an equal to other members. Allow him to tease the nation. Allow him to tease the sector, so that the discussion can be deepened, so that the discussion can be enriched. That is what Tito Mboweni wants, Honorable Minister Tito Mboweni wants.
Maybe
He
the
is
ANC
not
should allow him
opposed.
to implement his
He is
plans.
not opposed to the revival of SAA as you
Shut
want
up.
to accuse. That
Tell
is
them.
totally misrepresentation. We know that the reason that the DA in particular is so upset about the plan, about this plan, is that its sharks were waiting to cash in on the anticipation of the sale of SAA, is what I have just articulated. Honorable Chairperson, I want to make it clear that Minister Tito Mboweni yindloli yelizwe.
The election again.
Nguye umuntu owaba izithebe zeli lizwe. Unikwe lo msebenzi nguhulumende we-African National Congress. Akasebenzeli siqu sakhe phaya, uyayazi umyalezo into amele azayenze. Minister, inkokheli eziphefumleyo apha zonke ezimele amaphondo ziyibeka icace gqa into okokubana ewe khona kufanele uba lube khona uhlengahlengiso lobana kujongwe ubume bephondo nephondo, ungalinganiswa amaphondo ngoba iimeko zamaphondo ziyohluka. Nithi ke xa nisenza kumathuba azayo niqinisekise into yobana niyalumamela nuluve uluvo lwamaphondo kwaye lube sesizikithini sendlela enimele into yokubana nibe nabangalo izitya. Thina siyi-ANC, Minister Mboweni, through the chairperson, we support this budget vote 100% and wholeheartedly, because we believe that it is going to help us to turn the corner in terms of the challenge that we are faced with. We don't have a doubt in our mind that we have got absolute capability to assist the nation to find the way forward with what we have presented to us. We are not endorsing this blindly. Of course, we are saying you must take all the interventions and all the contributions and the messages that come from all our sectors of society, as well as all the spheres of government, into account as we move forward. Sifuna ubana xa nisakha ngokutsha obubutyebi beli lizwe niqinisekise into okokubana imisebenzi iyavela kwaye uqoqosho lwethu luyakhuphuka. Loo nto thina siyixhasa ngokupheleleyo, sithi qhuba Mboweni, qhuba ANC, qhuba eli lizwe sawulithatha silise kwikamva eliqaqambileyo. Ndiyabulela. Thank you very much.
Order. Thank you, Honorable Mkiva. Honorable Minister, we will now give over to you to respond to the debates on the Division of Revenue Bill. Honorable Minister Tito Mboweni.
The chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, honorable members, representatives of the provinces of our country, members of SALGA, and all other honorable members. Thank you very much, Honorable Deputy Chair, for affording me this opportunity to make a few remarks as we close this debate on the Division of Revenue Second Amendment Bill. In the first instance, let me thank the Appropriations Committee, which is ably led by Honorable Mahlangu, for the hard work that they've done in going through all the documentation within such a short space of time. I truly appreciate that and fully understand that indeed you did not have sufficient time, but nevertheless appreciate your sacrifice, which has got us to the point where we are. I'd like to thank all members who have participated in the debate. It's a bit noisy sometimes and shouty, but I appreciate your contributions. I'll come to that in a few moments, but I really thank all of you for that. I've picked up a few issues which require some response. The first one, which the DA seems to like very much, and to my surprise, the EFF has joined up with the DA, which sometimes confirms that ultra-left organizations tend at times to join up with the right organizations. The EFF has proven that today by agreeing with the DA on the issue of South African Airways. Let me indicate why that this is not a bailout. The 10.5 billion is not a bailout. What?
Please, Minister, really.
It is not a bailout because the allocation is made for the business rescue practitioners plan. It's not for the old SAA. If it was going to the old SAA,
we have order, please.
A bailout. So it is not a bailout. And if you check carefully the sub-allocations within the 10.5 billion rand, you'll see, like, for example, is provision for things like unflown tickets, retrenchment costs, commitments which have been made with the airline companies that have provided the aircraft to us, and so on and so forth. So it's not a bailout. So I will insist on that. That was a cabinet decision, by the way, and therefore the responsibility of the Minister of Finance is to implement a cabinet decision. It's not my own private decision. The second point I picked up, which I really truly sympathize with, is on local government. And that, I mean, all of us, as we say, we live in local government. And therefore it makes sense for local government to have sufficient capacity and capability to perform its functions. But also local government should also take their responsibilities seriously, for example, by paying for bulk water supply that is coming from the water boards and so on, whether it's Lipelle water, Umgeni water, Rand, water board, Mahalis, and so on. So they have a responsibility. And I'm aware that now we might face another demand from the water boards because they're not being paid by the municipalities. But I'm very sympathetic to the local government issue. And to that extent, I do agree that we should speed up the process of the review of the division of revenue formula. I agree with that. But that does not mean that local government should not collect its own revenue. Obviously, must collect their own revenue, which I'm sure they do. And therefore, as we review the formula, we should take that into account. Thirdly, I've picked up the point that colleagues, honorable members, would like to see the National Treasury and probably the FFC performing impact studies, which will indicate whether we're succeeding or not in doing what we're doing. But I've been a little bit disappointed, to be honest. I've been a little bit disappointed in that I think we have not, in the debate, I know in the committees it happened, but in this debate, we did not thoroughly locate the division of revenue Second Amendment Bill within the scientific concrete economic and financial situation of the country. And as a reminder, honorable members, we were going through a massive global economic slowdown, major contraction of GDP globally. Here in South Africa, we're also going through a huge contraction in GDP performance to the tune of some 7.8 or up to 8% if you take the forecast of the South African Reserve Bank recently. Of course, inflation is very low, which is a benefit to us. Although there's a huge amount of fluctuations in the exchange rate, the standard deviation can smooth out the fluctuations. And here is the crux of the matter. As a result of the decline, the contraction in economic performance, our revenue collection has also gone down. So our revenue forecast in February is radically different to what it is now. A decline of some 322 billion rand. Now, given that there's low economic growth, yes, decreased revenue collection, it means our projections that we had in February of the revenue we're going to have, and therefore, what was the funding gap, and that will go and borrow from the market in order to fund the gap, is now totally different. So we can't go on in the same way. As I indicated before, we are no longer as rich as we thought we are. In fact, there are a number of things that we must consider scaling down point because we can't afford it anymore. And we can't continue as if it's business as usual. And therefore, I really appeal to the members to walk with me on this journey when we try and put the finances on a better footing. We need to bring down the debt to GDP ratio. Of course, part of that process is growing the economy so that the denominator is much more stronger. We need to ensure that we implement the structural reforms that we've been talking about, which are being implemented as we go along the way. But let's bear in mind, honorable members, Deputy Chairperson, that the situation has radically changed. And as John Maynard Keynes would have said, when circumstances change, I also change my mind. Don't you? In fact, as situations change, we change our minds. But I think that those few issues which I've picked up, I think are sufficient for us to be able to move ahead and pass the bill so that, and once the appropriations bill as well comes through, money can start flowing and we can start doing what we need to do. But once again, Deputy Chairperson, I have no intention to be long. I thank you very much for your contributions. As I say, I've noted quite a number and very much appreciate your commitment to getting our democracy moving in a vibrant way. I normally ignore the polemics that members bring to the table. That's part of the political boxing thing. And I'm not very good at it. I'm sure you'll be surprised. I'm sure if I was to shout a bit, I'm not of that pedigree at all. But thank you very much indeed. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Honorable
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kitty.
Order. Thank you. We will now proceed to the voting on the bill. Ordinarily, we would have requested provinces to make declarations of vote, but we had a debate. So I don't know, honorable members, is there still anyone that wish to do a declaration of vote? Because I think the intention came out very clear in the debate of most of us or everyone. So if there is no indication of declarations, we will proceed to voting on the question. And the question is that the bill be agreed to, and when called upon, is there someone speaking?
Yes, Chairperson.
Oh, Honorable Abuskachni, because I was looking at the raise your hand thing and I didn't say anything, so it's fine. Continue.
I do have a very short declaration type.
We continue.
Thank you. This Division of Revenue Second Amendment Bill does not meet the needs of the people of our province. The unscientific slashing of the wage bill presupposes a court outcome, and any prudent province will need to record a contingent liability to safeguard against a negative outcome, especially since the African National Congress in the Public Service and Administration Committee appears opposed to the cuts. The cuts to equitable share to fund the SAA bailout are unconscionable. Taking money from healthcare, education, and crime fighting in the current environment in order to fund the failed state-owned enterprise goes against everything that is right. The procedures followed in the processing of this bill were rushed and flawed. The Western Cape does not support the bill.
Thank you.
Awulaleli, uyayithanda i-break out.
We are continuing, and I think we can proceed with the voting on the question. We will now call upon heads of delegations to indicate whether they vote in favor, against, or abstain, and we will do it in alphabetical order. Eastern Cape. Eastern Cape.
Eastern KPI Council report.
Nkosima. Free State.
Thanks, Chair. Free State wishes to abstain from voting.
Thank you, Gauteng.
Gauteng in support.
Thank you very much. KwaZulu Natal. KwaZulu Natal.
iKwaZulu Natal iyayeseka.
Ngiyabonga ma.
Yebo mama. Limpopo abstain.
Mpumalanga.
Mpumalanga supports.
Northern Cape.
Northern Cape support, Honorable Chair.
Northwest.
Northwest support, Speaker.
Western Cape.
Western
Western
Cape
Cape is already indicated. I'm sorry, yeah, now you have indicated. So, which means 6 of the provinces. Just guide me a little bit. Do we need 5 provinces, Advocate?
Yes.
6 of the provinces have supported the bill, which means that the bill is adopted and accepted by the House. Thank you very much. Voting is closed. Please start again. Close the voting. 6 provinces have voted in favor, and we therefore declare the bill agreed to in terms of Section 65 of the Constitution. Agreed to. Honorable delegates, let me thank the Minister, the special delegates, and all our delegates in the NCOP for availing themselves for this debate. That concludes the business of the day. The House is adjourned. Stay safe and join us tomorrow for the 16 days of activism dialogue in the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Ow, Chief Whip.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, comrades. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, NCOP. Have a lovely afternoon.
Chief Whip.